Good morning, Sandy. How are you? Do you have snow? We've got flurries here in Toledo this morning. And it's cold. Okay, just checking a few things on the computer. There we go. Hi, Janice and Vesta. Good morning. Okay, so I found myself, and I can see comments, so I'm so glad that you're able to join me this morning. For those of you who are new, my name is Julie Heights. I am the chirpy card maker of quilts and more, where I love to combine my love of quilts and piecing them, but just doing it with paper instead of fabric. So I started quilting in 1998. I had done my very first quilt as a home ec project my senior year, and had always wanted to get back to doing it. And back in 98, I found a local quilt guild that I joined, and was actively sewing up until the pandemic, and that's where I just transitioned over into paper crafting, but carried my love of quilting and quilt patterns with me. So here we are. I am from Northwest Ohio, Toledo specifically, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, so I am so glad that you're here. We've got a piece it, chop it, so there's no mystery block, so to speak, but you will get to, you'll see the pattern really big, and then we're going to chop it up to get 4 card fronts out of one big block. So I love doing these, especially if you find yourself wanting to make multiple cards. It's really easy to do when you start out with one big piece and chop it up. So I hope you like it. This is the second one that I have done, and we're going to get to it. So good morning, everybody. While I am switching some things around on my craft table, will you please say good morning to each other, and then we will get started. And I have to find... Okay. I don't know why it seems so new, but sometimes those widgets just give me a little bit of a problem. Let's see, we got to flip some things around, and then I am not very sturdy here, so hold on. Got to make sure that in the middle of things I don't, let's see if we can bring this in a little bit. Hey Robin, good morning. Excited to see your name pop up here. Okay, let's see how this is gonna work. Hopefully nothing's gonna come crashing down. Let me just move the computer to the other side and bring my trimmer over there. So how's that? That looks pretty good. So now I can get a really good look at who's here. Hi, Barb and Linda, Susan, Holly, and Stephanie. Hello, Linda, Kathy, Peggy, Diane, Janice. Good morning, everybody. Hey, Gail. So as I had mentioned, we woke up to some really tiny snow flurries a little while ago. The flakes were coming down a little bit bigger, but they've already melted. So no big snow day here, but it was kind of nice. It didn't really feel super cold outside either, although it is cold. I expected it to be a little chillier. So today's piece it, chop it, I am going to be using for my labels, the Christmas labels stamp set. I've done several of these cards using different dies. I'm going to show you some examples where I've used the dies that go with this set. It was not really one that was on my radar, but I am so glad that I got it. So what I'm hoping is maybe we'll get some stamp sets that for different occasions that we could use these labels or these dies with. I don't know. This might be it, but I really, really like this die right here. So I am going to show you my samples that I've done, just so that you can get some ideas in your head, and you'll understand when we get to the template where your options are. Okay, so let me show you some samples that I've already done, and you will kind of get the drift of what we're doing here. And you'll notice that when I show you the second set of samples, that where you place your colors, the placement and everything like that, there's going to be a color that really stands out and makes these different one set to the next. And with this big white square here, we have some options for that. But here, it's all I didn't change the paper up, but where I placed my color, the red is really speaking to me here. Okay, so that's one set. And then the second set, to me, the blue. So we've got this one and this one. The blue really popped out, and these colors in this card really remind me of the lights on a Christmas tree. Just the colors. I just automatically think of a Christmas tree. But you'll also see where I didn't put my label down here in this white space, and I let the embossing really stand out on that. So I used different embossing folders and just played around, and you can just see how different these look from the red set, but it's all the same paper. Okay, so yeah, so let's get started. And the card that I'm doing with you, the cards are probably going to scream a different color than this one on these two sets here. So let me show you the template, and then we're going to cut and score our papers, and we're going to do all of it together all the way through. Okay, so this is the template. We're starting with a 7.5 by 10 inch base. Okay, that's the same size as the piece it chop it that I did the very first time. We're just changing this, and this pattern will probably remind you of a log cabin. However, we're not putting like darks on one side and lights on another, although you could do that. This whole part here could be like your darks, and this could be your lights, and it would appear as a whole to resemble a log cabin block, but we're going to chop it up, so you're not going to get that full effect. Another block that it kind of reminds me of is the courthouse steps, where you're just stepping, you know, going from large to smaller towards the middle. Being that it's a rectangle, I'm not getting even numbers sections, but it still is going to make a really pretty card. So when I do the PDF, I will scan the template for you. I like to have it nearby because what I can start doing is playing with my strips, and I'm starting out with 3/4 inch by 12 inch strips, and I'm going to be kind of mirroring them on the sides and the top, so they're going to be the same. You could do this totally scrappy and not have a plan, okay? But what the template will allow you to do when you have it next to you is you can start kind of laying your colors down to see what you like as far as contrast and what plays well with others. So that's the template. And then bringing my designer series paper back in, I kind of want to show you how I went about. I've got these in the order that I want to put them on my template, okay? And I wanted to make sure I used both of the multicolored patterns. And then when I laid them out and I started my order, it can be that this is where I'm going to start working from the inside out. You could reverse them, but I started with this strip here, and I look at the colors that are in that, and I want to put something next to it that doesn't blend super well. Like I would not want to put this one next to it because you can't differentiate the patterns, okay? Or the colors just go into each other and it looks, there's no separation. So I looked at this, and that's why I chose this shades of purple, because it's bringing out the purple that's in this strip. Then when I went with this one that's got the wild wheat and the yellow tones, it brings out the yellows here. But it also marries the strip that's next to it, which has just little tiny bits of the wild wheat color, but the purple ties in with this one over here. So it's just, I'm looking for contrast, and I'm looking how I can transition into the next strip, bringing that color in. So this strip here has some blues, which ties in this pattern here in color. And then I brought in the B side to bring out the pretty peacock and shaded spruce that I find in this strip. So that's how I go about looking at what I want next to each other. I want there to be separation. I want there to be contrast. Hi, Mary Ellen. Hi, Sharon. Sharon, we're going to start out with an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, but we're going to cut everything together, okay? So I am going to move my strips for a moment and keep them in the same order. And we're going to get started prepping our card bases and our layer and our template, okay? So I've got those out of the way. Let's start with our template. Now I'm going to use just basic white. It's very easy. It's easier for me to teach bringing white into it. And then you can go off on your own and change things up. So when we bring the template in, this 4 by 4.5 inch center makes up those 4 white squares that you saw in the samples. If you want this to be a solid color other than white, then make your template that color. Or if you want to make this another piece of designer series paper, then you're going to want to cut that 4 by 4.5 inch piece. That's what you would start out with first and then build. We're working from the inside out. But to make the teaching easy, I'm going to go with white. That way, that's going to be the color of my center. It's going to be the color of my template. And then the designer series paper is going to be the color that pops. And you'll see that as we go. So 7.5 by 10, we're just going to take an inch off of 8.5 inch by 11. Okay, so I'm just going to work on this side of my trimmer, and I'm going to take off, here's 8.5, I need 7.5. So I am going to make sure that I'm on the line there. I'm going to take an inch off there. I'm going to rotate my cardstock, and this is 11 inch, but I need 10. So I'm just going to take an inch off of this side. So that creates our template. You can save these 1-inch pieces for any stamping of a sentiment that you want. Okay, and now to help find the center of this piece here, I'm going to score my center, but then I'm going to, when we're done, I'm going to take a pencil and outline it for you to see. But what we're going to do is I am going to score at 3 inches. Turn it around and score it at 3 inches again. So I'm finding that center. Once we find the center and we're just building outside of it, I don't need any more score lines or drawn lines either. And we're going to rotate our template, and now I am going to score at 1.5 inch on these two sides. And how do I know that I need 1.5 and on one side and 3 on the other is how many strips that I am building and how wide they are. So we're using 3/4 inch width strips. So if I only have 2 rows on this side, that's that 1.5. Where we have 4 on the other end is 3. Okay. So I know that it's hard for you to see because I'm doing this on white. Therefore, I'm just going to come in with my pencil and I'm just going to outline the center so that you can see where it's at. Whoops. It's hard to see on the white. But for me, it's just as easy to score as it is to just bring out the pencil and a ruler and then have to line up. Now I will want to go in and erase any pencil lines that show because I've got that white center. But this way it's easier for you to see how I'm going to start building out. Okay, so there is my center. And I didn't get really dark, but I think you can see it. And don't worry about these score lines that are still in there because you're going to cover those up. This was just so that we could get our center. I'm going to set this aside for a moment. Bring the trimmer back in, and I am going to keep with the same layer color, which is Blackberry Bliss, and depending on the size of the border that you want to see on the outside of your here, let me show you. Do I have... Okay. If depending on your mat layer underneath your quilt block, if you want 4 by 5 1/4, cut your layers. You'll need 4 of them. Or if you want a really thin border, then you want 4 1/8 by 5 1/8. So it's going to be up to you. I think I'm going to cut 2 at 4 1/8 by 5 1/8. And then I'm going to do 2 at 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. I think those are the same size. Yep. And then 4 1/4. No, it'd be 4. No, 4 by 5. I'm sorry, because I was like, wait a minute. This looks... That doesn't look right. Because when we chop up our quilt block and get 4 pieces, each one of those pieces are going to be 3 1/4 by 5. So 4 by 5 1/4. Had a mind lock there. I apologize. It's what I get from not making my little cheat sheets. So here, now how did I end up with the same? Hold on, hold on. That's... Well, I'm doing all 4 1/8 by 5 1/8. Because I just messed that up. But you can figure out your layers. Now that's 4 1/8. Or was that 4? 4 1/8. Oh, hold on. 5 1/8. I'll figure it out later. We're not going to get all hung up on our layers. I can figure that out when we get to that part. I do apologize. And now for your card bases, I am using basic white thick, and I am going to make them, I am going to score once on each sheet at 5 1/2. And then I'm going to turn it and I'm going to cut it in half at 4 1/4. So here are 2 card bases, top fold, and one's going to be a side fold. Excuse me. And let's do our second piece. So now we'll have our card bases. Okay. So we've got our card bases. We've got layers here that will probably need to be tweaked just a little bit, but that's okay. We've got our template and we've got our strips. So let's start building our quilt block, our one big quilt block. I'm going to put my template right here. I am going to bring in, I'm going to keep my trimmer nearby because I'm going to tell you how long I'm going to cut my strips for each section. So I'm going to start building my block by putting these 2 strips on the sides of my center, and they are 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/2, and I need 2 of those. Well, I can get 2 of them out of one strip, and I'm going to make sure that I don't cut them too short, because it's easier to overlap them than to be short when you're meeting all those papers together. So I'm just going to go a little heavy on the 4 1/2 inch line. So here will be 1. And a little heavy here. Got a little nice little piece, scrap piece there. And there are the first 2 pieces to our quilt block. So we'll put these down. And I am always working sides, side and side, top and bottom. And I am working to the outside of that pencil line, or the outside of my center. But to get started, that pencil line or score line is going to help keep me straight, because that is important. And then don't be afraid to hold your work up in front of you and just make sure you've got everything in place. Okay, so now I'm going to work on my strips for the top and the bottom. And those are 3/4 of an inch by 5.5. So my strip, when I had them in order, was this one, and I believe I'm going to be able to get 2 out of this strip also. But what it lets me play with is like what colors are in one strip versus the other if you're a planner. So I want to make sure I'm at 5.5, and I'm doing my cutting just right off to the side here. So here's a 5.5 inch width, and you want to make sure you're getting really close to these sides meeting up. If it's just a smidge off, we can deal with that. But you don't want to cut too short, because then you might want to make sure you don't have that little bit of white that's going to be showing from your template. You might have to, before you glue it down, always test it before you glue it down. If I would need to take my Stampin' Write marker and just make a line to blend it all together, I can do that. If it's not super, super short, you can make that work right there. So those are the next 2 pieces. Okay. Just going to butt those seams together, and I'm just going to even it out. Okay, that will work right there. So the next, we're going to go to the sides again. So I need the strips to be as long as these 3 pieces together. So it's going to be 3/4 of an inch by 6 inch. And I had put my strips in order to where I was going to work with the blue. Again, I'm going to be able to get 2 out of 1 strip, but it never hurts to have more in case something happens. And so there's the 6 inch. I went a little heavy. See how I've got this little, you can see this little tiny white gap. I am just going to make that work. I am going to butt that up against there, and if I have to overlap this little strip here, I will. You know what, I was off. I'm going to cut another one. I'm not real happy with that. I went a little heavy on the 6 inch, and it just didn't give me enough leeway there. That's much better. That's much better. So these little areas of red that I see, what I'm going to do is I am just going to overlap that a little bit. I'm not going to start over. And just like in sewing, if you are a scant, either way, your block, if you keep repeating that over and over again, the block's gonna get larger than it needs to be, or it's gonna get smaller than what it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna want to fix this and even it out, but right now I want these to get together here. And I don't want to see that little bit of white. And, you know, with double-sided paper, remember, you might get going and you look at that B side and you flip it over. That is totally fine. Okay, so there's our next strips. And then now I'm working at the top because I did sides. So I'm going to finish my top and the bottom. And those are 7-inch length. So I'm going to need 2 strips for that. And I know my paper is 12 inches. So I'm going to cut 5 inches off, which keeps me from having to put this arm out on my trimmer. So I'm just going to cut 5 inches off, leaving me with my 2 7-inch lengths. And those are going to go on the top and the bottom. And if you find you're coming off of your template, I would say make it fit the outside edge. That might mean that you're overlapping this paper just a little bit. I do that instead of then having to turn it over and trim any off. I just make it work. So I am going to just put it to that outside edge. And like I said, if it ends up being that I have to overlap the paper underneath it a little bit, that's going to be fine. When we do the quilting, remember, when we run our quilt blocks through an embossing folder and through the machine, it's going to lay down our ridges. So I'm not worried about that. So there's that, and yep, this is it. A lot of times I just think about all the times when I had to rip out a row that I was quilting on the machine, or you're on the bias and you're trying to make it all fit and you're pinning like, I don't know, 100 pins just to make it work. That's the, you know, what I do with paper also. Okay. Yep, so I'm turning it over to make sure that I don't have any designer series paper sticking out. But if I did, I would just take my snips and snip it off. So now we're just down to building out our last 2 layers or rows here. And so now these need to be 7.5, which means if I don't want to extend the arm of my trimmer, I am going to cut off 4.5 inches. And then these are going to go here and here. And in the end, when we go to square up our block, if you end up having any of your templates showing, well, then we just take care of evening that out in the end. I'm going to bring this down a little bit because I don't want to see a whole lot of white. There we go. So right now I'm really loving where these colors are falling. And I'm like, I don't want to chop it up. I don't want to chop it up. This is really making a really pretty quilt block here. And the final strip is going to be 7.5 also, because these are both equal. Hi, Debbie. Kathy, I love it. I love reading Kathy's comments because she'll throw in, you know, sewing, like SEW, and just gets that whole quilting vibe and lingo going. I love when she comments. So she's like, this is so much easier. So, oh, good, Pam. I'm glad you're going to be playing after lunch. So again, my last 2 strips, I'm going to cut off 4.5 inches so that it gives me my 7.5 inches that I need to complete my block. And you'll notice you've got a nice little collection of scraps that you can use for another card. And I'm just going to see where these, make sure that they fit, and they do. Now, I want to make sure that I'm on the edge. Okay, so they're the right length, but do I want to turn this one around? I think I want to, it's not going to matter, Julie, because we're going to chop this all up and it's going to go on a card layer. And we don't know which way we're going to use it. Are we going to use it as a portrait, or are we going to use it as landscape? So I'm just going to go to my outside edge, follow that line there. I can bring it down a little bit. Oh, I just lost my other strip. I might have to do a little bit of trimming. Okay, where did that strip go? Oh, here it is. Nope, that isn't it. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, I have one of those, I don't know, those things that you put on the floor so that your chair rolls around a lot easier, and it's dark. And of course it had to land with the blue side up, and I could not see it. And I was in the shadows of underneath my table. So, but we're good. We're back in business. Okay, so there is my quilt block, and I'm going to get my scraps out of the way. So if you're wondering why work with one big piece and then just to chop it all up, why not do them each one at a time? That's a lot of cutting, because you would have to be cutting multiples of smaller sizes. It's easier on the hands to work with big pieces and then chop it up. So just trying to make this easy in a number of ways. Less cutting initially and easier pieces, size pieces to handle. Okay? So now, so let's look at this center. And I am leaving it white because I want my quilting to show up in that spot. But if you had looked at your designer series paper and you wanted this to be a different color, if it's a solid color, let's say, just for instance, let's say this kind of looks like petal pink. If you wanted this to be a solid color of this right here, I would make my template that color. And then you don't have to worry about putting anything here on the center. But if you wanted this to center to be designer series paper, then you're going to want to cut a 4 by 4.5 inch piece of that designer series paper. put that down first and then start building your sides, your top, and your bottom from there. Okay, so if you want this a solid color, I would make that your template. If you want it to be a pattern and have designer series paper, then you're gonna want to cut that. Now, if you want to be really clever, after you've got your template already drawn out on white, you could stamp the inside and create your own designer series paper if you wanted to. There's so many options and so many ways that you can go with this. So it's all on there. I'm going to flip it over. I see that I do have some squaring up to do here. Get those pieces off. That, it's real fine. I'm not going to worry about that. I think I'm going to trim this a little bit more. Okay. So once you've got it all squared up, now we're going to chop it up. So I'm going to cut it in half in both directions. So if it's 10 inches across, we're going to cut it in half at 5. And it's 7.5 inches the other way. So now we're going to go 3 3/4. 3 3/4. Okay, so here we've got our quilt blocks for 4 cards. 3 3/4. And I am going to, I want you to help me pick out an embossing folder to do my quilting. And I went with non-directional things as far as patterns, so that it didn't really matter how I'm going to put them on my card. But I picked out some embossing folders that I haven't used yet. This 3D kind of reminds me of quatrefoil, but that 3D one I like. I've got the dashing diamonds or something, dashing something, an eyelet, the cute crochet, and then this is a retired embossing folder, but the time worn I liked. Do you have one that you would like to see more than the other? Any suggestions? Kathy, you're okay. I was gonna go with, are you talking about a folder that I don't have? Because I know back in the day, didn't Stampin' Up! Have a quilting, a tufted kind of quilty one? Cute crochet, that's what I was thinking too. And I like it because it's not going to be real lofty. So let's try that, and let's see if we see what we can do with this. Is we can place it in our embossing folder, and we can get some squares out of that. I don't know if it's going to let me get one certain square in particular. Maybe down here. Maybe down... Oh, I don't think I can get it specific. I can't. That's okay though, as long as it's got the pattern in there. I'm gonna do one, and then we'll put them together. Really, it won't take me very long if you guys don't mind. I'm just gonna hurry up and emboss these. And if you're playing along, then, or what I could do is I could play with all of them. There's that one. You know what? I'm just going to play with a couple different ones. Let's try this one. We're just going to make them different. so this one's the eye, or the distress. Ooh, I like that one. Let's see. Let's grab another one. Let's do the eyelet, and we'll do this dashing diamonds or something that it's called. I do apologize for stepping away, but that's just how my craft room is set up. And I'm heavy-handed. When it comes to rolling. And I'm afraid I would bring down everything that I've got in front of me, like ink pads and punches. We don't want that. So one more. Just want to make sure it's straight. Always good to have options. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. So this is the eyelet. I like that. And this is that distressed, kind of reminds me of quatrefoil. I can't remember exactly what the correct name of this embossing folder is. I like that one. Here is the cute crochet, very subtle. You can see more of the design on the back. So it's very subtle. And oh, that diamond one. I like that. But this is good because now we have four different patterns that we can play with. And because they're 3 3/4 by 5 inches, I need to make sure that my layers, since I goofed on the cutting, they're going to be 3 and 7. What is my length here? Okay, I've got 5, which, hold on. This isn't going to work. That's too short. I'm going to get another piece of cardstock. When in doubt and anything to start over, I'll punch some shapes out of that. So I'm going to go with, okay, 3 3/4. I'm going to do a 3 7/8 because I wanted a thin border. And if they're 5, then I want 5 1/8. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 with a mini border and 2 1/4 of an inch bigger, like we're used to doing. So if they're 3 3/4, then I want a 4. And if they're 5 the other way, then I want 5 1/4. So I'm going to do 2 of each. Why was that so hard for me to get wrapped around my brain the first time around? Okay. And we're just going to adhere. Now, with this white edge, what I did on my other ones, I took my Stampin' Right marker in the same color as my mat, and I just ran my marker on the edge there, just so it didn't look so white. Just take that starkness away. And when I come to my white area, I just want to be careful that I don't move the marker down into onto that piece, but being that it's the same color as the layer, that's gonna kind of fade in there. Now, if this does not make a difference to you, because there's white that's going to be showing in one part of the block anyway, you can skip this part. Or we'll just skip that white part. We'll just go around it. We'll just see what happens. I overthink everything. And sometimes it works out well because it's that little, that attention to detail that can really set off your card. There's other times when it's just adds stress to me because I'm overthinking it. Okay, we'll stop. And now we'll just start. I'll do one, and then we'll move on to finishing the card, and we can look at the samples again, and then you can go back and finish your... So we'll do one. I'm going to set these aside for now. We're going to finish one card so that we can keep it moving. Just going to leave that little tiny border all the way around. Move it just a little bit. And then I had taken this gold, this is an online exclusive. This is the gold twisted thread. I love this. I had to rewind my little spool here because I started at the wrong end and I had one heck of a mess. So then what I did, once I got it all unwound, I taped the one end to the spool again, rewound it. But what I did was I took my snips, and on each end I cut a slit so that I could catch it when I'm done with it, and it holds it there instead of it just being really loose inside the package or coming unwound again. So I did that. So I'm going to look at my stamped sentiments here. And I think I'm going to do this Winter Wishes. And first what I want to do is like, where do I want this? And remember, you can turn all of this around. I want the edge of my flag here. I'm going to line it up with the edge of the quilt block. And I'm going to wrap this thread around. So I think I want it on the short side maybe. I'm going to let this pattern, I'm not going to cover that up. I want to see that. So I think I'm going to try it this way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold that and I'm going to wrap it so that I have 3. There's 3. Come back around and that is 3. And then I'm going to knot it, but I'm also going to put one of them underneath there so that it grabs all of those. I'm going to knot it again just to make sure it doesn't come undone. And I want my ends to be frayed, because I think it's just going to add, it's almost going to look like maybe I put something behind them, like if I was putting some greenery behind the label to add to, you know, if I was making a cluster or, you know, an element like that. But I'm just going to work with this and get it frayed. And I'll make sure that it's sticking out when I put my label down, and then I can trim it up. But also, I'm going to just kind of pucker my block here so that I can move, and I want to kind of just separate my strands just to kind of give it a design, and it helps tighten it up too. That one kind of maybe there. Play with my label again. I want you sticking out at the top. You can come over here. So I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to put some dimensionals on the back. Flip it back over. Let's see here. There. So I've got my frayed edges that I want to see. And I've got my strands coming out here. I know this is picky, but I'm going to pucker this up because I want to move one of my strands over the top of the other one. It's not perfect enough. As long as this doesn't become a big project here. Come on, I want you over. There we go. There, see how nice that is? One was overlapping the other one the wrong way. So now they're nice and even and straight. So it was worth that little few seconds there. Got my frayed edges sticking out, that little bit of gold. And now I'll bring in a card base. What you put on the inside of your card base is going to be up to you. I did not finish them on the inside. I'm going to make this a top fold. I am going to then glue that down. Come on, glue. Please don't squirt out at me all at once. Okay, so let's just have a nice even border all the way around. And then, now I am using some retired embellishments because I don't have a lot of gold embellishments and I want to carry that through. So I apologize that these are retired, but I want to use them up. These are old. And like I said, I don't have a lot of gold embellishments, and that's a color that I want to keep bringing through so that your eye goes to the thread too. Just put, let's put, oops, there, one more. Where do I want this third one? I didn't really think this through very well. I want it somewhere up here. We'll just put it up here at the top. And my card is finished. And I have 3 more that I can go back and do. But depending on whether you want your center square covered up, like these here, I put my label kind of halfway over it. Here on this one, I left it alone because I love these little circles with the embossing folder that I chose. So that will be up to you. Where's the rest of my cards? Where did they go? Oh, here they are. Again, I backed. So I saw a suggestion. If you want to add some depth to your label, if you offset a piece of cardstock the same shape behind it, just offset a little bit, it gives it a shadow and it gives it some depth. I played around with doing that. Here I put it to where like the shadow was along the bottom and the side. So I played around with that. That way I didn't have white on white when I overlapped my sentiment label with that white spot. Kind of helps that stand out. And these dies are from, oh, it's got the flags and the kind of the rounded off rectangles. Why is it escaping me? I know the name of that die set. But I just used some different dies because the sentiment was so big. But here's what I wanted to show you. The die that fits that sentiment is huge. And it was going to cover up my quilt block. Look how big this guy is. I mean, it's even bigger than this one here, but it's going to cover up. Well, I guess you'd still see some of the layers out here. Maybe I'll play with that. I just thought maybe it's too big. But maybe if you... I was just afraid it was going to take away from the quilting, but maybe not. Maybe I'll have to play with that. I thought it was too big, so I went to a different die for a couple of those sentiments. But anyway, so I don't know. There's not really any one color that jumps out at me here. I've just got a lot of different floral patterns, which is nice. This is very subtle. Where here, the red just jumps out at me. So depending on the colors that you're using and where you place them, something's going to speak to you. Here it's the blue. But they're all going to be different. So you've got a lot of possibilities. So I hope that you like this Piece It, Chop It Part 2. Little different than the first one. Again, I will scan the template so that it's in the PDF, which will, I'll upload that in our community group called Quilt Cards and More. I'll do that this weekend. But that template will get scanned in there. I don't know how to print to make it the full size. If you're a technical whiz and you know your printer and you can do that so that you can print it and be able to lay your strips in on the template so you can see what it's going to look like. That helps. I just don't know how to do that on the computer. So, but I will scan this and then let you, I hate to say let you figure it out, but I don't know how to do that. So thank you for spending your Thursday morning with me. I hope that this is something that you will give a try. You're going to get 4 quilt cards out of that one big block. So you can do some really quick and easy cards. You could spend an afternoon just making the templates up and then cutting them later when you need to throw a quick card together, if that's what you want to do. I know some of you make quilt blocks, a lot of quilt blocks up that we've done, and you have them on hand that you can just pull one out and finish a card rather quickly by adding that quilt block to whatever layout that you have. So that's it, everybody. Thank you for being here. I do want to announce that with next Thursday being Thanksgiving, I'm not going to do a Facebook Live. Friday night, however, is when we're going to put the November barn quilt, the card kit together that you can purchase. So if you want to tune in on Friday night and hang out with us for 45 minutes to an hour, we would love to have you. And then I'll be back as far as Thursday Facebook Lives the following week. So I am going to take Thanksgiving Day off, as we all should, because it's a day to be with friends or family, and just make it that kind of time. So my husband is going to Florida to see his parents with his sisters over the holiday week. So I will be home by myself with the doggies, and I will be spending a lot of time crafting. So on Thanksgiving Day, I could be up here in my craft room putting some things together. Maybe we can just hang out together or something, but I won't be doing an actual project. I don't know. I don't want to make any plans because I don't want to cancel them should something change. So everybody, have a really nice Thanksgiving next week with your friends and family. And I will see you next Friday night. And I will be going over into the group to see how your cards turned out. And again, look for the PDF to load over in the files this weekend. I'll upload this to YouTube. You'll get that this weekend too if you want to go back and watch it on YouTube. So thank you for the hearts. I'm so happy that you spent your morning with me. And I'll go back and I'll read your comments if there was any questions I missed. And I'll try to answer your questions, okay? So everybody have a blessed Thursday, and happy crafting.